Welcome to Your Path to Nonprofit Leadership, the weekly podcast that features the very best in career development in the nonprofit sector. I'm your host, Patton McDowell, and I'm committed to bringing you ideas and resources that will build your professional development plan. Well, thanks for listening. If you want to be a nonprofit leader, or maybe just more effective in the role you're in now, you're in the right place. I'm glad to bring you these weekly conversations with nonprofit experts who are, in fact, on the cutting edge of our sector. I'm also happy to give you an update on the release of my new book, also titled Your Path to Nonprofit Leadership. And it's been exciting to see the response so far. It's been out about a week and a half as this episode is released. And we're hitting several of the bestseller categories on Amazon. And for that, I am grateful. But frankly, I want you to read it because I think it will help. If you're listening and you are on the path to nonprofit leadership, that's exactly why I put this book together. Whether you're new to the sector in general and trying to chart your path to get started, or maybe you've hit a plateau. You've been in the sector for a while and now trying to determine what your next step might be. Or maybe you're outside of the nonprofit sector wondering if you could make a lateral entry. Whether you're any of these three potential readers, I think this book will help you. So check it out, pattonmcdowell.com/book, and that'll take you in any direction you need to get your hands on a hard copy of the book or perhaps an electronic version. I'd be happy to share that with you. Now, I had a fantastic conversation in this episode with Stu Manewith, who's the Director of Thought Leadership and Advocacy for Omatic. And while he brings the technical expertise you'd expect from someone who spent 3 decades in the sector working with Blackbaud and Razor's Edge and Financial Edge and other CRM platforms with which you may be familiar, but this episode is not going to be a technical manual on how to manage your database. No, in fact, Stu's experience includes hands-on direct experience as a nonprofit fundraiser and leader himself. So he gets it. And what he's trying to help us all understand is the inherent value of our data and what are the questions we need to ask. If we're not managing the data ourselves as a nonprofit leader, we still need to understand it. And we need to be able to utilize the inherent value in our data and make sure it is working for us. And Stu, in fact, has 5 keys to effective data management as a nonprofit leader. And after you hear these, you will have the questions to ask at your organization. And more importantly, you're going to have ideas how to make it better. So don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode is number 149. Just go to the podcast or the news page at pattonmcdowell.com and you'll find all of the resources Stu and I discussed, as well as more information on him and the great work he's doing through Omatic. And speaking of resources, while you're on our website, make sure you connect with us. We're on all the social media platforms, including YouTube, where you can find podcast episodes just like this one, as well as information on the book and our mastermind program. So check out Your Path to Nonprofit Leadership on YouTube if you'd like to learn more there. But now, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Stu Manewith. Stu, thank you for joining me on the path.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Well, I'm excited about this conversation too, Stu, because you've got great experience and insight, frankly, into a challenge that affects some of our best nonprofit leaders. And admittedly, data management may not be on their list of favorite things to do, but you make such a good point that it needs to be perhaps higher on their list of areas of focus. But why do you think so many nonprofit leaders are struggling with their data, and why should they pay more attention?
Well, Patton, the short answer is because the amount of data that nonprofits are getting, combined with the speed at which they're getting it, further combined with the number of different digital applications that can now be used to engage donors and constituencies and supporters, it can become easily overwhelming. And then you combine that even further with organizations that have lean budgets and so don't have the bandwidth to add either IT teams, IT staff, or additional data management staff, and further, more and more legacy systems that organizations have used for many years and are comfortable with are being sunset. So digital transformation is becoming required. And the reason that it's so important to pay attention to this is because your data is one of your most valuable assets, and when properly leveraged can drive increased participation, increased fundraising, increased credibility, all of which supports increased and more effective mission delivery. When the data are good, your information can be more effectively used to engage the right people at the right time with the right message to maintain and increase that very engagement. But when data are not cared for, if they're dirty or messy, the processes that are based on that data can become ineffective, and the people that you depend on engaging, donors, individuals, prospects, organizations that you want to engage, remain unengaged because the processes that you are using use bad data, and so the messaging does not get communicated effectively.
Yeah, I knew you would be the champion we need to hear, Stu, on this topic, because you're right. I hear a lot of nonprofit leaders who at one level will say, yeah, the data is managed somehow, but I'm not sure, or we're not even kind of scraping the surface of what our data management system can do, but it's still kind of put into a back burner. And I love the way you lift up the fact it's not data. This is really active relationship building, particularly as it relates to donors and, of course, other programmatic elements. So you're the perfect person to talk to. I know you, in fact, have 5 keys to data quality and management, which I think is going to get our listeners excited about this, as exciting as data management is for somebody like you. But before we do that, Stu, clearly you've had some great experience in the nonprofit sector, in particular around data management. Tell us, how did you get to the work you're doing now through your previous experience?
Well, thanks for asking, Patton. And like so many of us, we end up accidentally getting into roles that when we were in school or young adults, we never dreamed of. But I'll just take you back. I went to college at Washington University in St. Louis and got a business degree. But I also was a drama minor, so I did a lot of work in the drama department. And at the end of college, I thought to myself, and as a 22-year-old, people have these aspirations. I thought, okay, well, just like the song says, I want to be a producer. I really did want to be. I wanted to be a theatrical producer, but I found a master's degree program from the Graduate School of Business at University of Wisconsin. It was called the Bowles Center for Arts Administration, and so I was accepted to the arts administration program at University of Wisconsin. And what I learned, and of course I didn't know at the time, was that the focus outside of New York and Chicago and Los Angeles, the focus of most arts organizations is nonprofit. The vast majority outside of Broadway of arts organizations, theaters, museums, symphonies, even if you consider botanical gardens and zoos, which people consider cultural organizations, they're all nonprofit. So that master's degree program really focused on nonprofit arts administration. And so when I came out of that program, that's kind of where my head was. And I went to, my first job was at the Repertory Theater of St. Louis, producing children's theater. And I was taken under the wing of the woman at the time who was the director of fundraising. And she really helped me see the importance of fundraising and nonprofit management and how they married together. And I kind of never looked back from a nonprofit standpoint. I went to work after that at a small membership association, and then I cut my teeth as the director of annual giving at a big hospital foundation, also in St. Louis, where I also learned a heck of a lot about nonprofit accounting, because I was kind of betwixt and between the fundraising team and the finance team. In fact, I ended my tenure there as the director of finance for the Barnes Jewish Hospital Foundation, which was a $20 million a year fundraising entity that supported that hospital.
Wow.
From there, I went to work for a company called Blackbaud, which is based in Charleston, South Carolina. And at the time, and I think it still is, the leader in software dedicated to the nonprofit sector, particularly fundraising and nonprofit accounting. And so I worked there for 13 years implementing software for nonprofits, fundraising and accounting systems. I spent some time there as a solution architect, which meant I would go into organizations and learn what their requirements were and then try to build the right solution set for them, the right technology solution set for them. And then I also managed a team of consultants there for some number of years. And then that led me to where I am now at Omatic Software, where I started working about 6 years ago, first in implementations, and then about 3 years ago moved into advocacy and thought leadership.
Yep, love it, Stu. And as I already knew, your experience covers the broad range from arts and culture to healthcare, and of course, all the organizations you work with and helping them with data. So I think our listeners have perked their ears up now, and that they are agreeing that they need to pay attention to their data. They need to be more effective in how they manage it. Often they are in small shops, as you know, but I think you've got some great advice. No matter what size or scope of your nonprofit organization, you've got 5 keys to help them more effectively manage their data. So let's start with that. What is the first of your 5 keys to their more effective data management?
We look at 5 dimensions of data quality that we focus on, and those are currency, cleanliness, completeness, validity, and integrity. And so now I'll go back and start over again. Current data are fresh, up-to-date data, the most timely information available. And sometimes that's hard to get. Data becomes stale if you're not on top of it. Clean data, the second one, clean data are accurate and error-free, free of errors, free of misspellings, miscasings, improper titles, improper suffixes. No donor or prospect wants to get an email or a letter sent to them that has their name spelled wrong, or that is when they're a junior when they're actually a senior, or vice
wrong
versa,
salutation,
or
right?
Wrong,
or something like that.
Even wrong gender.
Yes.
Which, I've got a colleague whose name is Pat, and he's a man, he's been called a woman, and that has really soured him on the organization that he gave money to. So clean data. And I said something about miscasings. People may not understand what that means, but that is like, God bless my father. I love him to death. He will type on an online form everything in uppercase. And then a letter will come to him typed that way, and he doesn't understand why. And so putting people in proper case. Your name, McDowell, I'm guessing is often butchered with, with a lowercase d when there should be an uppercase d.
Well, and Stu, real quick, because I use Patton as a middle name. So again, organizations that aren't paying attention perhaps jump to my first name as William. And then that, to me, as your friend indicated, it just shows the organization is not quite paying attention, or
that they don't know you.
Exactly.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. If someone, not many people, my full name is Stuart, and not many people call me Stuart. I've gone by Stu, for the last 40 years. So, it's that kind of thing. Complete, the third one, complete data means you have consolidated data points, and this is so important, consolidated data points from all the various places that you store data, so that those who need the information have the full picture and there are no blind spots. If you're talking to a donor and all of your event data is stored in a different system, and you don't know that they came to the last event or that they had to cancel at the last minute because somebody got sick, then there's a blind spot in that conversation, and you can't leverage it, right?
Exactly.
Number 4, validity. Valid data means that the information is what I call situationally legitimate. For example, zip code 58104 is a valid zip code for the state of North Carolina, but it wouldn't work in Florida or in Arizona. So the data could be correct, but not valid for the situation that it's in.
Right.
And the last one, integrity. Integrity means the data are truthful and reliable. So to use a simplistic example, you may have someone in your database named Mickey Mouse living at 123 Sesame Street, and that could be spelled properly, it could be cased properly, the data could be complete and error-free, but it's not a real person or a real address, and so there's a data integrity issue there. So just to repeat, the 5 dimensions of data quality that we focus on are currency, cleanliness, completeness, validity, and integrity.
It's fantastic, a built-in checklist, and it
Yeah.
seems to me that organizational leaders can use that. In fact, how do you suggest they use that, Stu? Obviously, they can bring an organization like yours or an individual like you, or do you find that this is something a nonprofit could contract someone once a year to do kind of a cleanup exercise? How do you see it implemented?
So, it depends on the size of your organization, the size of your team. I would absolutely, frankly, to be blunt, I would absolutely start internally and see what existing bandwidth can allow in terms of doing what I would call relatively easy things like cleaning up duplicate names, cleaning up duplicate records, cleaning up obvious misspellings or miscasings and those kind of things. Then there are certainly data hygiene services that can be purchased, where you send your data out and a service will look at it and clean it up or append information and send it back to you. Omatic, what we do, and I know you haven't asked me yet, but I hope we're going to get to it. What Omatic does is we integrate data. We move data from all those satellite systems into your main database, and we can make sure that it gets cleaned up along the way, that duplicates are prevented, that the data quality is checked. But and again, to be blunt, if you've got a dirty database to start out with, there are other services that I would start internally and then job it out to an external provider if that's what it takes.
Well, and a lot of it, I guess, is running the reports built into your database, right, Stu? Or at least that would have been my history of to catch those duplicates or other things. But I guess there's still the need for some oversight by an individual, right, in terms of you just spotting things.
The easiest, to your point, the easiest place to start is with the built-in validation queries or deduplication reports that most sophisticated systems have in native, and then see how far that gets you, and then take it from there. Summertime. I know it's still late winter, early spring right now, but summertime is coming up, and there may be college interns that would want to keep busy for a summer cleaning up data. If an organization's main team has other things to do.
Well, I was going to ask you that because, as you and I have talked about before, that a lot of organizations, are understaffed in the nonprofit sector, particularly smaller ones. And of course, you've seen it in the arts and culture space in particular. They've got one person that's doing multiple things in the quote business office. And so that is, I guess, any other ideas on what small shops can do? But in fact, your great idea of perhaps looking to interim or part-time contractors that could come in and do the summer cleanup.
I think that people think it's very overwhelming before they start, and so I guess I would say start internally with an internal team, carve out, if it's possible, 8 or 10 hours a week, and see how far you can get and how challenging or really easy it is. And Pat, it can be dull work, but it's so important. It's so important.
It pays off, doesn't it? Right.
It pays off because once your data are clean and complete, then they can be used far more strategically. And if they're dirty and stale, then you're just going to be sending the wrong message to the wrong person, or sending them information that is not timely, or that won't resonate. And so the strategic advantages of cleaning up definitely outweigh the tactical time that it takes to do it.
Yeah, and your illustration is perfect, and I've done that myself. The kind of the fear factor of imagine your top donor at your organization right now getting a misspelled salutation or greeting or communication, and what that does.
Or I'll give you another true life story, and cut me off if you're watching your clock. But we worked with an organization, and there was a major donor who was making a gift online and mistyped his email address totally accidentally.
Yep.
And so the system didn't recognize it, automatically created a duplicate record, and because it was a bad email address, the guy never got an acknowledgement letter because it was a bad email address, and it bounced back, and it created a second duplicate record with the amount of that gift. And so his real donor record didn't have the right amount, didn't have the right history. It was understated because he had made an amount that went to another record. So with that, if that's not cleaned up, then when they get their next solicitation or when they get their year-end report, it's going to have bad misinformation in it.
One problem led to many, right, in that
Right.
instance. And that's,
right.
again, a good reminder of why we need to pay attention to this. And of course, you've given different examples of ways to address data management and all the 5 elements of your kind of validation of data quality and management. But let's talk about Omatic. What is it? What does it do? How do you all work with organizations?
Omatic Software is a 20-year-old company that began working with Blackbaud products. So listeners will recognize names like the Razor's Edge, Financial Edge, and was built as a sophisticated, advanced data integration tool for organizations that needed to get data from systems or files outside of Razor's Edge into it. And over the past 20 years, Omatic has really grown into being a data integration solution, a hub. Some people might call it a platform for organizations that use both Blackbaud systems and Salesforce systems and all of the different satellite applications that they might be using for online donations, email marketing, peer-to-peer fundraising, event management, volunteer management, wealth screening, all of the different things that people have all of those different engagement tools for. We work with them to get to ensure that the data in their main database system of record is current, clean, and complete by amalgamating and cleaning up all of that data coming in from outside sources. We also work with organizations that need to get data from their main revenue data, in particular from their main system of record into their general ledger, which can be another just real challenging circumstance if those systems don't naturally talk to each other, and frankly, most don't.
Well, and I was going to say, and I know we're going to get into that because that marriage, and sometimes an uneasy marriage between fundraising and finance, is one that you have helped provide guidance and counseling, I would say, between those two, the matchup there.
Many times. When I was working for the Barnes Jewish Hospital Foundation in St. Louis, I started out on the fundraising side and I ended up on the finance side. So I saw both sides, kind of through I guess a more experienced perspective. Then again, when I worked at Blackbaud, I implemented a number of organizations on both the development and the finance systems. And so part of my job was to make them talk to each other to ensure that systems were being implemented correctly and that both sides had their requirements met. And so you do a lot of counseling. You do a lot of couples counseling.
More than just technology, right? So
that's right.
More than just technology. And well, let me go back to that before we get into the marriage part, and which we will. But again, I guess you're saying it's often a commonplace kind of when you arrive at an organization, you're seeing multiple databases. In fact, I'm familiar with many. They have the events and ticketing software. They've got their fundraising software, and then they've got the business office software. So Omatic, in essence, comes in and helps blend all of the technology or make sure it talks to each other.
We do. That's actually a more succinct way to put it than I did. Is yes, we blend all of the technology. Data in particular, we ensure that the data from all of those different systems gets from source to destination, from destination back to source, and that it is that all of the systems in that universe or in that solar system are always current, clean, and complete. That data quality is there. We've built API integrations between probably the most commonly used nonprofit systems for email marketing, online donations, peer-to-peer fundraising, event management, and those main database systems of record that have been developed by Blackbaud and by Salesforce.
Got it. And you're right. I think most of our listeners probably, if not using one of those two, are certainly familiar with them. But whatever they're using, your points remain very valid in terms of do our systems work well together? And I would argue, Stu, many of them don't, and they're maintaining, in essence, redundant
Yep.
systems. But let's start with so I'm in the finance or business office, but what's the perspective there? And I hear this, and again, we'll get into sometimes the antagonism between that office and the fundraising office, but they have to maintain their data in a different way. And I guess that may be where some of the tension occurs.
Well, yeah, absolutely right. It can be a really tricky relationship because both teams, and I'm talking about the development or fundraising team on the one hand and the finance accounting team on the other, both teams have a deeply vested interest in organizational revenue, but and both teams are equal in terms of being critical to the organization delivering on its mission, but each team looks at that revenue in distinctly different ways. And yes, there is tremendous interdependence between the two teams and reliance on one another. The fundraising team does a lot of really hard work identifying and engaging donors and then cultivating and soliciting and stewarding them, and of course collecting their gifts.
Right.
Fundraising counts the money, but the finance team accounts for the revenue, most importantly, ensuring that they record it all according to generally accepted accounting principles.
Right.
Most people call that GAAP. We call it GAAP, or generally accepted accounting principles. And most fundraisers have never heard of GAAP, much less know what it requires. So
Right.
it can be a tricky relationship. And I don't mean any slight on that.
Right.
Fundraisers and development professionals have their own code of ethics, their own professional alliances or allegiances, and they shouldn't be expected to understand the nuances of fund accounting or of generally accepted accounting principles, but it does create a dichotomy.
Well, but you raise a good point. And as I work with a lot of fundraisers on that side of the house and some of our coaching programs, it would pay them to learn more about the other side, whether it's just a course or frankly, just sitting down with the CFO or the business office and understand where they're coming from. Where I see it come to a head, Stu, more often than not is around board meetings. In
Yes.
other words,
when
the reports come up and you see one side of the staff reporting, and then, if finance is reporting, development's like, no, that doesn't tell the story. And then I'm sure vice versa.
That's 100% right. And in fact, one of my colleagues and I, when we do a webinar on that very topic, and we do a little role play where the development side is at a board meeting, exactly right, and they say one set of numbers, and the CFO or the director of finance has another set of numbers, and the executive director, can't believe that her team isn't, is coming to a board meeting with numbers that just don't correspond.
Let's talk about that kind of webinar you're calling. Maybe that's something we can link into the show notes or invite our listeners to check it out. But so how do you help reconcile that exact scenario that I bet many of our listeners are familiar with, that fundraisers are mad that the finance office presents it this way, finance office is mad that the fundraisers are presenting it a different way? How do you help them reconcile?
Well, it can be frustrating for both sides. It can be very frustrating for a few key reasons. And so that the objective is to understand what those reasons are, and then to put some procedures and some tools in place to address them. On the finance side, there are both strategic and tactical issues. Strategically, the fundraising team will often create reports that don't account for revenues the same way finance does.
Exactly.
Sometimes those reports, and we've just talked about it, sometimes those reports are shared with stakeholders who may have already received GAAP compliant financial statements, and they don't correspond. And so, and if you think about some of the things where you get bollocksed up, so pledges and pledge payments, planned gifts, conditional donations, these can result in all kinds of reconciliation issues. And on the tactical side, so very often the fundraising team sends over to the finance team transactional information for them to record in the general ledger that's either not recorded correctly or has to be re-entered before it can be uploaded, or doesn't tie out to bank deposits. And it takes more man hours and more labor to kind of uncover the things, find the needles in the haystacks. And sometimes, time is of the essence. It's at the end of the month and you need to generate reports, or the end of the quarter and you need to generate reports. And, I don't want to make it seem, Patton, like it's all one-sided. It's equally frustrating on the fundraising side. Fundraisers are not only rarely trained on accounting principles, but even if they are, it doesn't come into play as much when their main job of the fundraising team is to build relationships and engage donors and prospects and make the entire fundraising experience pleasant and valuable to the donor. That may mean doing things that naturally go against the grain of the finance professionals, such as gift restrictions that are cumbersome to enforce, or using third-party platforms that are great for donor engagement but may not capture all of the data that the finance team needs to effectively record transactions. I remember working with one organization that was never able to tie out credit card sweeps because the development team recorded each gift separately without fees, which as they should, and the accounting team recorded the daily deposit as one transaction with revenue net of fees. And so there was always that difference. Why was, and well, that was why they exactly.
Well, it still leads me to a couple of things. One, the importance of staff orientation. As new development or finance people join your team, perhaps it's very important to have an intentional kind of coordination between both sides there, so that at least one side better understands the other. It also makes me think, Stu, about the board getting orientation as to the kind of data the staff will be presenting. And if it's going to be two different reports or a single report, but I think board members, some of them are going to be understanding of the finances and or development side, but many are not. And so do you help them understand going in? But I guess that leads to my question, Stu. If I'm an executive director, should I blend this data into a single report, or do I let both teams report their own?
I think it's the onus is on the staff. And not on the board. And it's not just the board. It could be key donors or key prospective donors, especially corporate donors or corporate prospects, when presenting information that is not where development numbers and finance numbers are different, and the explanation of why. I think that both development leadership and finance leadership needs to be articulate in why numbers don't tie out if they don't. And I think the onus tends to be, because of general accounting principles, the onus tends to be a little bit more on the development side to explain why their numbers might differentiate or divert from finance numbers. Certainly both teams want what's best for the organization. They want to see the organization succeed, and they want to do their part to ensure that happens. Think of this: is the accounting as a profession and generally accepted accounting principles have been around a lot longer than fundraising as a profession. And while both professions have their code of ethics, development really doesn't have a set of standard fundraising principles like accounting does with GAAP, because by definition, fundraising is a more fluid process.
Yeah, well put. And where I've seen good examples here, Stu, have been, one, again, internally, as you said, the onus is on the staff to get together and literally talk about how they're going to present this, and perhaps create a format, a template that is based on the GAAP kind of reporting requirements, frankly, that the business or finance office has. But maybe there are ways to illustrate some of the nuances coming from the development side, particularly, as you said, restricted, unrestricted, pledges, plan gifts, and other things that the development team very much wants to illustrate to its board. But I wonder if they could create a good way to illustrate that. Because again, if I'm a board member and I'm getting multiple reports and, they don't line up, that to me is where you can get some frustration maybe on the board side.
That's right. And here's an example of that, and that is pledges and pledge payments. Pledges on their own can't pay for anything. They can't pay for programs or services that an organization delivers as part of its mission.
Exactly.
You need cash for that. But according to GAAP, you count pledges count as revenue when they come in, and then all those cash payments don't count as new revenue. They just reduce the amount of a receivable. But from a development standpoint, they need to collect that cash so that there's actually money for the organization to do whatever it does.
And pay the bills, right?
Deliver on its mission.
Yes, indeed.
Buy more basketballs, or buy more meals, or give more scholarships, or buy equipment that is going to change people's make people better if it's a hospital, or
right.
Pay for research. So when a development organization, the development side of the house, reports that all this cash from pledges has come in to allow which allows the organization to do the things that it planned to do this year, but it doesn't count as revenue because that revenue has already been counted because it was counted when the pledge has been made. That's something that is going to that it's not going to reconcile unless someone explains it.
That's right on target. And again, Stu, I'm thinking for the leader of an organization, to me, you've motivated me, one, to better understand the data, make sure I have systems in place to assure that it is accurate and clean, and all the elements of your 5 keys are in place, but also to make sure my 2 teams, development and finance, are in alignment. Perhaps they have some marriage counseling like you provide, right?
Well, they want to trust each other. Both teams want to be able to trust each other and work together collaboratively. They want to. And that's often where Omatic comes in. We build integration solutions that ensure fundraising revenue is properly extracted and transformed so it meets the requirements of the finance system without manual intervention and can be reconciled at any point in time. And what that does is it helps to build trust between the 2 teams. Finance trusts the data coming in from the fundraising team, and the development team is no longer frustrated by being asked to make corrections and adjustments, and also trusts what's being sent over to finance.
Yeah, it's so good that you lift that up. And to me, again, it's a takeaway for the leader. Instead of waiting for some of these things to crash during a board meeting, which is the worst time for that to happen, to give it some thought and engineer some of these conversations. It also strikes me as a professional development suggestion that, Stu, for those that are on the ladder to nonprofit leadership, they often come through, like we all did, through one side of the house, right?
Yeah.
Program, fundraising, maybe finance. But the point is, if I want to be an executive director or a president or CEO, perhaps it's good for me to get oriented to these other areas.
Well, and to put yourself in the other one's shoes, right?
Yeah, good way to put it.
There's nothing that can be done about the fact that fundraising is more relational than fiscal, and that finance is an older and perhaps more well understood function, especially by external stakeholders. So if you can understand the nuances of the other side, and put procedures and tools in place to ensure that both teams' needs can be met and that neither team feels subordinate to the other, and that both teams can be effective in their role, that will make the organization successful, and that will give you as a leader insight into that balancing act, that marriage counseling. In this case, divorce is just not an option. These teams are going to they have to work together. They have to. So it's an interesting proposition that nonprofit leaders need to ensure that they can and that they do.
Such good advice. In fact, Stu, I've got lots of notes from this conversation. Again, an area that I don't think gets the attention. And as we started this conversation with, it often is on the back burner for nonprofit leaders, but it needs to be moved up and be part of a more active engagement in their strategic planning, as well as their systems management. And is there anything else? You've worked with a lot of talented leaders across sectors. Is there anything else you've seen the best of the best do, or advice you might offer someone thinking about leadership in nonprofit?
So I go back to thinking about data and systems, and we're living in an age where there are more and more options for apps and systems and different software tools that can be used to engage donors where they want to be engaged. And what I would say is, don't be afraid to explore all those, because there are tools like we have at Omatic that will help you ensure that your data get properly amalgamated. So if you want to explore crowdfunding, or if you want to explore some different application that is peculiar, that resonates with your particular audience or markets, don't hesitate to explore it, because there's always going to be help. There are plenty affordable tools that can be used for cleaning dirty data, for expediting processing of data so that your database is always current, clean, and complete. And at Omatic, we recommend developing an overall data integration strategy rather than relying on assortment of point-to-point imports and manual error-prone data entry. But that shouldn't make nonprofit professionals and nonprofit leaders reluctant to explore all of the different options that are out there for the most effective engagement with their markets, with their prospects and donors and supporters and constituencies.
Absolutely right on target. And yes, there's a cost to some of this activity in terms of time and budget, but the return on this investment is significant. And I'm sure you see that all the time, versus my key donors not getting communication or getting upset. And as we have talked about more than once.
Let's accentuate the positive, right, rather than the negative. If your tools and technology are reliable, and data is effectively integrated and clean and complete, then the business processes that take advantage of that data they're going to be more effective. Communications will be more timely and personalized and appropriate, and the donor or the constituent or the supporter experience is going to be improved. Those prospects are going to be more effectively converted. Those donors are going to be more effectively retained. Likely the average gift size will increase, which will mean more money raised and mission delivery goals exceeded for more mission impact. If you think I want to accentuate the positive and not the negative, but if you just turn that image that I just stated over on its head, and you don't have good tools and the data are bad and the messaging is bad, that means that donors aren't going to be retained and new prospects aren't going to be converted, and less money is going to be raised, and you won't be able to have the funds needed to meet the mission impact goals, the mission delivery that your board has set out for you. So the tools and the technology, most tactically, save time, save errors, save money, but at the most strategic, they can really mean a difference between meeting your mission delivery goals and not.
Well put. And Stu, if there was not incentive to consider, as I hope every listener is right now, thinking about data, the quality of their data right now, the systems, but you put it in a much more impactful way, that this is mission critical discussion, not some kind of back office function that I'm afraid sometimes nonprofit leaders might put it to the side for that reason. And you're bringing it to life in a positive way, that if we do this right, we're going to have better engagement. We're going to generate more revenue. We're going to be able to do what our mission wants us to do.
My favorite stories, Patton, are from our customers, our clients, who purchase Omatic products because only they want to streamline processes and save time and have less error-prone integration, and frankly, not worry about it as much.
Right.
And what they don't realize until after they've been using our tools for 6 months are those strategic benefits. That it really means that data is available to fundraisers more expediently. They can be more strategic with it. They can build segments more quickly. They've got cleaner, fresher data with which to engage their constituencies, and so the messaging is better, and the timeliness of the messaging is better, and more funds are raised, more donors are converted, and there's more money available to meet their mission. So they buy for a tactical reason, but they stay for a strategic reason.
Well put. Stu, thank you. Just like all of this conversation, lots to take away for our listeners. Of course, I'm going to encourage them to go to the show notes and they can access more about you and Omatic. As you know, though, I'd love to get another parting gift from you, Stu, which would be a book. Is there a book that you might recommend that's been meaningful to you that you would also advise our listeners to consider?
Sure. I would recommend a book called Data Driven Nonprofits by my Blackbaud colleague, Steve McLaughlin. Steve is a VP at Blackbaud. I believe, don't quote me on this. Of course, you're quoting me right now, but
Right,
I believe that he's the VP of products at Blackbaud, but he's a genius, and he wrote a book called Data Driven Nonprofits, which I'd recommend.
I could not agree more. If I'm a nonprofit leader, I need to understand the data. Sounds like we can go to the expert source there. Thank you, Stu, for sharing that recommendation. And where can folks find out more about you and the great work you're doing at Omatic?
So omaticsoftware.com, OMATICSOFTWARE.com. You please come to our website. On the website, you can see there are webinars that talk about these very topics that are recorded, or you can see upcoming webinars that we're doing. You can also get information about Omatic products and the services that we offer, the tools and technology that we provide nonprofits to ensure that their data is of high quality. I don't know if I mentioned it. I don't think I did, but I will mention that Omatic only works with nonprofit organizations. We don't have any non-nonprofit customers. All of our customers are nonprofit organizations, and because of that, we really have walked the walk. We have walked in the shoes of all of those organizations out there across all the different subsectors: healthcare, higher education, faith-based, arts and cultural, animal welfare, environmental, research organizations. But the one thing they have in common is that they are all nonprofit and they all want to make the world a better place.
Thank you, Stu. Delighted to hear more about the work you're doing, and thank you for the work you're doing across the sector. And thank you in particular for joining me on the path.
Oh, Patton, it has been my pleasure. I look forward to the next time we chat.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Stu as much as I did and came away with some practical ideas that can not only guide you on your professional leadership journey, but certainly enhance your organization's approach to data management. Don't forget about the show notes. They are available on our website, pattonmcdowell.com, where you can find out more about Stu, about Omatic, and all of the resources he and they have to offer. Remember, this is episode number 149. And as always, share this episode with someone else if you would. We're continuing to build a global community based on nonprofit leadership. And if you want to help expand it with us, go to the podcast page at patmcdowell.com. First of all, you can make sure you are subscribing to this weekly podcast. Just hit the follow button. Follow equals subscribe. And that will take you to all of the primary podcast platforms and also allow you to share this and any other episode with someone else. Don't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. They come out every Thursday. And if you like this episode, you can also click on the episodes button at the top of that podcast page, and you can scroll down through the thumbnails of all of what now approaches 150 episodes. Thanks again for all you're doing in the nonprofit sector, especially right now. And keep up the good work for causes that are most meaningful to you. I'll keep bringing you content that can help you do it even better. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time on The Path.